What if the country that shocked you the most was not the cheapest, not the wildest, not the most ancient, but the one that simply did everything right? That country for me was Singapore. I have been to Malaysia, the Philippines, and South Korea. Each one of those places gave me something I will never forget. Malaysia gave me the food. The Philippines gave me the ocean. South Korea gave me the energy of a city that never sleeps. But none of them prepared me for what Singapore was going to do to me. Singapore is a city-state the size of a small island, with a population of roughly 5.5 million people, and yet it operates at a level that most countries with hundreds of millions of people simply cannot match. The moment I stepped off the plane at Changi Airport, I knew this place was different. Everything worked. Everything was clean. Everything made sense. And for a traveller who had just come from 3 very different countries across Southeast Asia and East Asia, that feeling hit me like a wall. Today, I am going to take you through 10 things about Singapore that genuinely shocked me. Stay with me, because some of these will absolutely change the way you think about what a country can be.
Point 1. Changi Airport, the best airport on Earth. Let me start with the moment you arrive, because that moment tells you everything. Changi Airport is not just an airport, it is an experience. It has been voted the world's best airport for more than 12 consecutive years, and when you walk through it, you understand exactly why. Inside this airport, there is a waterfall that is 40 meters tall. That is taller than most buildings in many of the towns I grew up visiting. There is a garden, a cinema, a rooftop swimming pool, and hundreds of restaurants and shops. And I am not talking about a small corner of an airport terminal. I am talking about an entire world built inside one building. When I landed after a long connecting journey, I was tired, a little disoriented, and honestly just wanted to get to my hotel. But Changi slowed me down. It made me stop and look around. The signage is clear in multiple languages. The immigration process is fast and digital. The baggage arrived quickly. Everything moved like clockwork. In Malaysia, in the Philippines, in South Korea, airports are functional. Changi is something else entirely. It is a statement. Singapore is telling you from the first second that this is a place that takes excellence seriously.
Point 2. Cleanliness. A level no other city reaches. I have walked through the streets of Kuala Lumpur, Manila, and Seoul. I love all 3 cities, but none of them are Singapore clean. Singapore is operating at a completely different standard of cleanliness that you have to see to believe. The streets, the train stations, the food courts, the public toilets, every surface you encounter feels maintained. There is no litter on the ground, there are no overflowing bins. There is no smell that hits you as you turn a corner in the way it does in every other dense Asian city I have visited. And before you think this is just about rules and fines, because yes, Singapore is famous for its strict laws, it is actually about culture. Singaporeans genuinely take pride in their environment. You see this in how people treat shared spaces. They clean up after themselves. They queue properly. They do not honk unnecessarily. Coming from Manila, where the traffic is loud and chaotic and wonderful in its own way, the contrast was almost surreal. Singapore felt like someone had pressed a mute button on everything messy about city life. And honestly, walking through those streets, I felt a kind of calm that I did not expect from one of the most densely populated places in Asia. Point 3. The MRT. Public transport done perfectly. I took the MRT, which stands for Mass Rapid Transit, everywhere in Singapore.
And every single time I could not help thinking about how public transport back home could learn from this system. The trains are air-conditioned, quiet and on time. The stations are clean and easy to navigate. The maps are clear. The announcements are in 4 languages: English, Mandarin, Malay and Tamil, because Singapore is a country that takes all of its communities seriously. I never waited more than 3 minutes for a train. In Seoul, the metro is excellent, and I was already impressed by that. But what made Singapore different was how the whole city felt designed around the idea that not everyone owns a car. You can reach almost any major attraction, any neighbourhood, any food court, any shopping mall, all by train and bus, without needing a taxi or a rideshare. That kind of thoughtful urban planning changes the way you experience a city. You are not stuck in traffic, you are not sweating under the sun trying to find a cab, you are moving through the city smoothly, affordably and on schedule. That is a gift to every single resident and visitor, and Singapore has been delivering it for decades.
Point 4. Food culture. Hawker centres changed my life. If there is one thing that every traveller agrees on when it comes to Singapore, it is the food. But knowing that before you go and actually experiencing it are 2 very different things. I ate at hawker centres every single day. A hawker centre is basically an open-air food court where dozens of independent stalls sell incredibly specialised dishes. One stall only makes Hainanese chicken rice. Another only makes leksa. Another only makes char kwai chow. And these stalls are not serving average food. Some of them have been perfecting the same dish for 30 or 40 years. 2 hawker stalls in Singapore have even been awarded Michelin stars, which means you can eat Michelin-starred food for under 5 Singapore dollars. That is less than $4 US. I ate chicken rice that made me close my eyes. I had laksa that was creamy and spicy and perfectly balanced. I had satay from a man who had been grilling it at the same stall for over 20 years. Malaysia also has incredible food. I will never deny that. But the hawker centre system in Singapore brings everything together under one roof, keeps prices low, and maintains a standard of hygiene that makes you feel completely safe eating every single thing on the menu.
Point 5. Safety. Walking alone at 2 in the morning. One night in Singapore, I walked back to my hotel from a late dinner at around 2 in the morning. I was alone. I had my phone out taking photos of the lit-up skyline along the Marina Bay waterfront, and at no point did I feel unsafe, not even for a single second. I want you to understand what that means for someone who has travelled widely. In Manila, I would never walk alone at 2 in the morning with my phone out. In Kuala Lumpur, I would think twice about certain neighbourhoods after midnight. In Seoul, it is actually quite safe, and I felt comfortable there too. But the level of alertness you naturally carry as a traveller never fully disappears. In Singapore, that alertness just melted away. The city has one of the lowest crime rates in the entire world. It consistently ranks as one of the safest cities for solo travellers, for women travelling alone, for families, for everyone. This is not an accident. It is the result of strict laws, well-funded policing, a culture of civic responsibility, and a population that genuinely values social harmony. Walking those streets at 2 in the morning, alone and completely at ease, was one of the most quietly powerful experiences of my entire trip.
Point 6. Gardens by the Bay. Nature reimagined. I have seen incredible natural and man-made landmarks across Asia. The Banaue rice terraces in the Philippines, the temples of Gyeongju in South Korea, the Petronas Towers in Malaysia. But nothing prepared me for Gardens by the Bay in Singapore. These are massive tree-like structures called super trees, each one between 25 and 50 meters tall, covered in living plants and flowers. And at night, they light up in a sound and light show that feels like something from a science fiction film. But it is not just the super trees. The indoor gardens, called the Cloud Forest and the Flower Dome, are two of the largest glass greenhouses in the world. Inside the Cloud Forest, there is a real waterfall inside a building, surrounded by plants from tropical mountain regions around the world. Walking through it, you forget that you are in the middle of one of the most urban environments on the planet. Singapore does something genuinely remarkable here. It refuses to accept that a city has to sacrifice nature. Instead, it weaves nature into the city, on rooftops, along highways, inside buildings, and in places like gardens by the bay, in a way that makes you rethink what urban living can look like.
Point 7. Multiculturalism. 4 cultures, 1 city. Singapore is about 75% Chinese, 15% Malay, 7% Indian, and the rest a mix of other ethnicities. In many countries, that kind of diversity would be a source of tension. In Singapore, it is the source of the country's identity. I walked from Chinatown to Little India to Kampong Glam, which is the Malay and Arab quarter, all within the same afternoon. Each neighbourhood felt distinct. Different food, different architecture, different sounds, different smells. And yet they all coexisted with a sense of mutual respect that felt completely genuine. There are 4 official languages. Public holidays cover Chinese New Year, Hari Raya, Deepavali, and Christmas. The government has deliberately built policies over decades to ensure that no single ethnic group dominates public housing in any area, so neighbourhoods stay diverse. Compared to the racial and religious tensions that exist in various forms across the other countries I'd visited, Singapore's approach to multiculturalism felt like a quiet miracle. It is not perfect, and Singaporeans themselves will tell you that. But as an outsider walking through those streets, the sense of a society that has genuinely decided to make diversity work was something I found deeply inspiring.
Point 8. Smart city technology. The future is already here. Singapore is one of the most technologically advanced cities in the world, and you feel this not just in the big visible things, but in the small everyday details. Contactless payment works everywhere, from the hawker centres to the taxis to the smallest neighbourhood shop. The government's digital services are genuinely easy to use and accessible to everyone. The public Wi-Fi coverage across the city is fast and reliable. Autonomous vehicles are being tested on public roads. Smart sensors in buildings and streets help manage energy use and reduce waste. The country has a national digital identity system that lets residents access hundreds of government services with one login. When I was in the Philippines, I spent an afternoon trying to do something simple at a government office that should have taken 20 minutes and ended up taking 3 hours because of paperwork and queuing. In Singapore, that same task would be done on a smartphone in less than 5 minutes. South Korea is also extremely tech-forward, and I was very impressed there. But Singapore applies technology not just to entertainment and commerce, but to governance, infrastructure, and everyday life in a way that genuinely improves the experience of living there. That ambition, applied consistently across an entire country, is extraordinary.
Point 9. Cost of living. Not what you expect. Before I went to Singapore, I had heard that it was one of the most expensive cities in the world. And for some things, that is absolutely true. Owning a car in Singapore costs more than in almost any other country on Earth, because the government controls the number of vehicles on the road. Renting an apartment in the city centre can be extraordinarily expensive. Alcohol is heavily taxed, and some restaurants, especially in tourist areas, charge prices that would shock even visitors from Western Europe. But here is what surprised me. For a traveller who knows where to eat and how to get around, Singapore can actually be quite affordable. Hawker centre meals cost between 3 and 6 Singapore dollars. The MRT is cheap. Many of the best attractions, including Gardens by the Bay's outdoor sections, the waterfront, Chinatown, Little India, and Kampong Glam, are completely free to visit. Public beaches exist, and they are beautiful. If you live like a local rather than like a tourist, your daily expenses can be remarkably manageable. I actually spent less per day in Singapore than I did at some tourist-heavy resorts in the Philippines. The key is knowing that this city rewards the traveller who is curious enough to look beyond the obvious.
Point 10. The feeling. A country that chose excellence. The last thing I want to talk about is not a specific attraction or a statistic. It is a feeling. Singapore is a country that was born with almost nothing. In 1965, when it became an independent nation after being separated from Malaysia, it had no natural resources, no hinterland, no fresh water of its own, and a population that was poor and ethnically divided. Its founding Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, described the situation as a matter of survival. And yet, within 2 generations, Singapore became one of the wealthiest, safest, cleanest and most efficiently run countries in the world. The GDP per capita today is among the top 5 in the world. Life expectancy is among the highest. Education quality is consistently ranked number 1 globally. None of that happened by accident. It happened because a society made a collective decision to choose discipline, long-term thinking, and the relentless pursuit of getting things right over short-term comfort and political ease. When I walked those streets and used that metro and ate that food and felt that safety, what I was really experiencing was the result of decades of choices made well. And that, more than any single sight or experience, is what shocked me most about Singapore. So there you have it. 10 things that Singapore did to me that I was not expecting. And I want to be honest with you before I close. Singapore is not a perfect place. People who live there will tell you about the high cost of housing, the pressure of the education system, the limits on political freedoms, and the ways in which the pace of life can feel relentless. No country is without its contradictions. But as a traveller, as someone who had just come from 3 other remarkable countries across Asia, what Singapore showed me was something I had not seen at that scale before. It showed me what happens when a place decides that excellence is not optional. When a society commits to making things work, not just well enough, but as well as they possibly can. I left Singapore thinking about my own country differently. Thinking about what we accept as normal that we do not have to. Thinking about the choices that shape what a place becomes over time. If you have never been to Singapore, put it on your list. And if you have been, I would love to know what shocked you. Drop it in the comments below. Like this video if it changed the way you think about Southeast Asia. And subscribe because there is so much more of this world left to explore together.